Thank you, Jeremy. It's really an honor to kick off this exciting incubator series on global health. And I'd like to thank Paul DeLuca for really making this happen. This does stem from the reaccreditation report, and I'm here to further the charge. My theme is One Health, integrating environment, wildlife, and the human condition for sustainable global health. And this really does stem from the reaccreditation report, the chapter on creating an impact and shaping the global agenda. There were 4 themes that emerged from this report. So the reaccreditation establishing these, I call them the 4 pillars of global health. Possibly, we can talk about this after the lectures, but there are already things happening on campus. The main activity that's been happening for the last 7 years on campus is the Center for Global Health. And the theme of the center is One Health. It's no surprise because people like former Dean Barney Easterday, who's here, Dean of the Vet School, was instrumental in helping establish the Center for Global Health under Cindy Hack's leadership. And that theme, because we do have a School of Veterinary Sciences on campus, One Health is a great theme to have to bridge environment, humans, and veterinary sciences as well. This new initiative out of the reaccreditation report, this Global Health Initiative that is setting up this series of lectures, focuses on root causes. Can we get to the root problems of global disasters and global epidemics? So my presentation, because I do work at the interface of environment and health, really will mostly focus on these first 2 pillars, the human environment system, the human condition, and then later I will quickly touch upon governance and ethics as well. So I want to just give you a little refresher in the history of infectious diseases. This is looking at a graph from England, and what you're seeing is tuberculosis trending downward, rapidly trending downward from the mid-1800s. But it started trending downward. The bacteria was discovered in the late 1800s. Chemotherapy and a vaccine not until after 1950. So you can see the trend already downwards before we had medical interventions. The same thing happened with whooping cough. Major, decline, drop of mortality from whooping cough, and it's only way down here that we have a vaccine for whooping cough. And the same story for measles. So you can see, there's many places in the developing world we know that there's very little sanitation or drinking water that's potable. But here's a place that does have modern conveniences of sanitation, electricity, and everything, and yet this city, this arrangement itself has public health challenges. For example, the 10 leading causes of death in the United States, most of them are related either to sedentary lifestyle, air pollution, or motor vehicle crashes. And to be fair, I did add diet and tobacco are pretty important as well. But when you think about this scenario right here, a modern lifestyle is not always a healthy lifestyle. And these issues of heart disease, cancer, strokes, and unintentional injury especially are tied up around the automobile. And so, we have that type of neighborhood is also unhealthy in a different way. We need to also think about our planetary neighborhoods as well. When you think about living in Manila and not having clean water, when you think about living in a suburban, sprawling place and not being able to walk or ride a bicycle, we also have to think about global aspects of where we live. We live on planet Earth. And many of you have seen graphs like this, where these are the projected trends of our temperature. You can see over the last 1,000 years, temperatures, and today we are hotter than we've been in the last 1,000 years, and the projections, because of burning fossil fuels and creating greenhouse gases and the greenhouse effect that is warming the planet, the projections are for a much warmer world, trending towards Venus, but hopefully we won't get that hot, and we'll do something about it before then. Now, of course, what does this mean for public health? So what if the climate warms? Well, if you think about the main physical attributes of climate change, rising temperatures, sea level rise from thermal expansion of salt water, as well as land-based glaciers melting, and extremes of the water cycle, hydrologic extremes, that can have an impact on health through many different pathways. We know people die in heat waves. Ground level smog is very temperature sensitive, so air pollution. Ragweed pollen is sensitive to CO2 and temperatures, so air pollution, allergens. And then vector-borne diseases, those are insect or rodent-borne diseases, are very sensitive to just subtle changes in climate. By the end of the century, there's a 90% probability that everything in red here will experience summers hotter than they've ever recorded in history. And that would put many people at risk of hunger. That would double the number of people, the billion individuals that are at risk of hunger today. That would double that number just by the middle of this century because of climate projection, climate warming. Some diseases may be responding already. This is a disease in agriculture, in livestock and sheep, blue tongue moving north in Europe in parallel with warming trends. And this relationship between changing climate and changing diseases in agriculture lead me to the core theme that I wanted to mention today, which is this theme of One Health, which is a theme right now of the Center for Global Health on campus. And under the theme of One Health, you're combining human health, agriculture and domestic animals, wildlife, and ecosystem environmental health. It combines everything. And this slide actually is by way of our very own National Center for Wildlife Health, based here in Madison. And I did catch that we do have the director here in our midst today, Dr. Jonathan Sleeman. So we are really lucky here in Madison to have this USGS National Center for Wildlife Health based next door and collaborating with us as we try to do a more comprehensive look at human health by including wildlife health and everything about that. Some examples very quickly. We know that when we go into the forest and we hunt animals that are similar to our own genetic makeup, like hunting monkeys, that's a dangerous occupation. And it's been documented that there's a high risk of cross-species transmission of viruses, and especially across species with little genetic distance between hosts. Remember that we as humans, we are also primates. And so HIV/AIDS has been documented pretty solidly. I think it's 99.9%. The evidence is there that this came from chimpanzees, a simian monkey virus that jumped over into humans, started our HIV/AIDS epidemic. And there are other diseases that are zoonotic diseases that come from animals, Ebola, influenza, and BSE. This is just a PCR image looking at the serology between the human hunters and the monkeys, and the bottom line is that there is transmission. And if you look at all diseases, all emerging human diseases that have occurred in the last few decades, a majority, 75%, come from animals. These are zoonoses, come from animals. Good. So this is why it's very important that when we're looking at global human health, that if we really want to get solutions and be comprehensive and proactive and preventative, we had better have an understanding of wildlife disease, domestic animal diseases, as well as the interaction with the environment. And of course, we all know and are very worried about avian influenza, bird flu. Thank you, Chris Olson, for this slide. Certainly this is one where we really understand the risk between humans and bird flu, but of course, we need to know all these interactions between wildlife and domestic animals. This is a diagram that Professor Chris Olson put together to show that for avian influenza, where the aquatic birds seem to be the central of this disease, there are a lot of other animal species involved. And of course, when humans are involved, well, that's a problem. But this is where we cannot ignore these ecological relationships and understand diseases in wildlife and other animals. Now, aside from simply zoonotic diseases in wildlife, how is the rapid change of our ecosystem around the world, how is it affecting health? Are there health risks from altering landscapes? Are there trade-offs between crop monoculture, for example, and natural ecosystems? Our next presenter, Dr. Allen, will be talking not only about interspecies transfer of plant pathogens, but she'll also be talking about the pitfalls of monoculture in plants. So what about ecosystem services for human health? Are intact ecosystems actually protecting us? And I'll just show you results from one study where we found that in the Peruvian Amazon jungle, the places that had the most degraded forest, over here on the far right, the most degraded forest, had the highest number of malaria-carrying mosquitoes. After controlling for human population, we controlled for human population, and deforested areas led to an increased malaria risk. So we think that intact ecosystems, especially tropical rainforests, could be protective. I want to wrap up, and I don't want to ignore the last two pillars of governance and values and ethics, and I want to show you an example of the intersection between these four themes under the reaccreditation report. One, looking at governance, is a case of North Korea. When major droughts are hitting North Korea all the time, in the 1990s, it's estimated that over 200,000 people died every year from these droughts. The majority of incoming food aid was diverted to the North Korean military to support their troops, and very little food aid got out to the people. So I leave this question to you and to Jeremy and his students to figure out, which was more responsible for these deaths? Was it the severe weather and the droughts, or the inflexible government in North Korea? And obviously a combination of both, but this is a very complex situation. And regarding climate change is a very ethical issue. Think about this map. This is a map that we developed. It's a data-driven cartogram. And on the bottom, what you see is a data-driven map of climate-sensitive diseases. Now, thinking about malaria and malnutrition and diarrheal disease, obviously the developing countries, Africa, India, these places have the most to lose with changing climate because they have these climate-sensitive diseases. But who's causing global warming? Who's actually burning fossil fuels, creating greenhouse gases, and causing the problem of climate change? Well, that's the top map. It's not Africa. It's the United States, it's China, it's Germany. The developed, industrialized countries are causing climate change, and yet it's the third world, the developing world, that could be, at first, the most at risk. But in a globalized world, we're all at risk, but these will be the countries which will suffer the most. And these are some numbers. As Americans, we consume and emit 6 times the global average CO2 per person. So this is an equity issue. So what was that bump that we drove over in our SUV? So in conclusion, I'd like to just say that I will ask the audience, are these the right pillars from which we should build a campus-wide effort on global health? These 4 pillars out of the re-accreditation report. And other questions, is One Health, the right model? Is it a really good model to hang on to as we do a campus-wide effort in global health? And for sustainable solutions, how many disciplines or sectors really need to be involved to solve these problems? Thank you very much.